brilliant panel who've eagerly taken to their seats already, which is brilliant. It's going to be hosted by Kristal Ireland. Please give them all a massive round of applause.
Good afternoon, everyone. I feel I've got the awesome slot, the pre-lunch slot. Thank you for sticking around. I'm sure there's some rumbling tummies in the audience. Yes, so women in industry. Broaden it out from the specific two talks that we've just heard before. We're going to talk more about women and how the industry affects us. But I'd actually just like to say I'd like to go a bit off brief, sorry, you've met me right, and talk about diversity as a whole and inclusion as a whole, because I think this is a much broader topic for the industry than just women. So I'd love to introduce you to our panel. We have Ariane Donoghue, who's joined us from Epiphany. We have Beth Everett from Deep Crawl, and we have Martin McGarry, who's a freelance, just if anyone needs to tap him up later. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm Kristal Ireland. So I'm going to learn how to hold my mic and an iPad properly. So, the search industry is a space for sharing thought leadership and celebrating our thought leaders. And I've worked in digital/search for nearly 15 years now. And certainly I've seen over the time that grow. I've seen the big conferences pop up. I've spoken at many of them myself. And one of the key things we always have when we run conferences is getting enough women to actually put themselves forward and speak. So thank you, Kirsty, for hosting that brilliant session on confidence, because actually that's one of the key things that you need to make that jump first in order to do. But if we broaden that out, we have a number of topics that sort of sit below the surface there. It's not just about having women be visible and be seen. We have to kind of think about what do we do in terms of women and their position within the industry. So we've got some cool topics to think about. I'll throw some questions out into the audience if anyone's got them. But really what we're looking at is getting beneath the skin of that and understanding it's not just about women not putting themselves forwards, but also at what level do we hold women to account within the industry, and is that different to the way that men are perceived? So my first question for the panel, and just to say, Martin's really nervous because he's the guy. He's terrified. And I've promised him I'm going to be a pussycat today. So we just need to just hats off to Martin for being like a guy who put himself forward. So well done, mate, because that took balls, I'm not going to lie. So the first question is it possible for women to have separation between their personal opinions and professional lives in the industry? And really that's, for example, can women get involved in that conversation around Me Too at any level? It doesn't matter whether you're a CEO right down to somebody who's starting out in the career. And would you feel that would have an effect on them personally and professionally within the industry? So I'm going to start with Ariane.
Yeah, I'll kick off with that one. And how many of you here are on Twitter? Show of hands? Most of you, okay. So unless you've been under a rock, you've probably seen a lot of the debate and everything that's happened on Twitter recently with regards to sexism and the state of the industry. And it's been really interesting watching the women who've chosen to speak up or not speak up. And many of them have said, I would love to say something, but I know I won't get invited to conferences, or I won't get opportunities, or I won't be able to do X, Y, Z if I voice my opinion and I'm seen to go against, this group of people. And I think it's really, really difficult because as women, we're so reliant on the networks that we build and the connections that we make in this industry. I know personally for me, all the good opportunities I've had in my career have come off the back of getting to know people and coming to events and networking, even though networking is like hell on earth for me as an introverted autistic. I hate it, but it pays off in the end. And so I think it can be really hard for people to say, actually, this is who I am, this is what's important to me, and this is what I take a stand on, but have that not necessarily limit you in some way. I've been guilty of this. There's things that I would have loved to have, talked out on or had an opinion on, but then it's that thing of, well, what will people think of me? How will people judge me? Is this going to impact my career? And I'm perhaps fortunate that I may be developed enough in my career now to be able to have that opinion and still have those opportunities. But particularly if you're newer in your career, I think it can be really difficult to define who you are and what you stand for, and then know that there aren't going to be any doors closed to you off the back of that. And I think it's perhaps incumbent on us to do whatever we can to make sure that those doors always stay open, regardless of opinions. But then I know so much of the industry comes down to, oh, well, I don't want so-and-so speaking at my event because X, something that won't necessarily be to do with their skills and expertise. And it ties in with a lot of the Me Too movement. And at what point do you separate, for example, the art from their artist? And I think that's something that as an industry we haven't quite gotten to the bottom of yet, exactly how we make that separation. And I do feel that for women, we are held to a different standard, and I'm sure we'll come on to that in a bit, and it's something that we need to try and do, but it's also incumbent upon those of us who can and have the power and influence, be we male or female, to make sure that there are safe spaces to talk about things.
I think Am I on? I think professionally as well. As I said, I've been doing this for a long time, and I've worked in both agency and client side and quite significant corporate level as well. There is a sense that the internet has a really long memory. So some of the things I might have done at award ceremonies when I was 22, and I would urge some of you young guys to do those things because it's bloody good fun and it's part of all the reason we do it. Would I do it now? There's a really famous photograph of me, this is not all about me by the way, but of me at one of the very first Daddy Awards, and I love the photographer who took this, he's a friend of mine, and it's about 10 years ago now, and it's just me and the camera going like that. And it gets pulled out by the drum quite a lot because it's just funny. But would I do it now, given my professional level and my leadership role in the business? Probably not. So it's just to remember that, I think, that, you know, how you behave and how you act can come back. I mean, it's not that bad. I've not done anything that bad. Just no goss. Over to you.
Yeah, I think it's really important for people to get involved in like social justice issues and speak about their opinion. Like everyone should have an opinion and be able to speak about it. And social media is huge now. So to be able to like put your opinion out there, it's scary, and I think as a millennial, like it's important for me to put my case forward, but I think there's a fine line between abusing that and abusing your opinion and taking it too far. I think you kind of have to find that line and say what you want to say, but don't take it too far, and open up that space for people to have that communication and talk and give their opinion, because it's so important.
Yeah, the Me Too movement is a great example of like the modern day protest. So you don't have to take to the streets anymore and start barricading yourselves to government buildings, because social media has that voice that allows people to say what they want to say. You generally don't get to say what you want to say at a protest. You stand up with a banner and that can be missed. So being involved in something like Me Too online, you can actually filter through and find the individual opinions, and those can be used as the voice for the campaign as well. I think there's two environments where that can go wrong. One is if your opinion is toxic yourself and you're being aggressive, so maybe you need to look at how you're protesting. And the other one is if your opinion is oppressed, and if your opinion is oppressed by those around you, you've probably got the wrong people around you. So if that's an employer or your peer group, anyone oppressing opinion in this modern day world needs to have a look at themselves. So definitely you should have a voice, and you really shouldn't worry about whether it's picked up, because if you don't continue to have that voice, that the reason you're protesting will just continue, and we won't get anywhere if we don't have a voice.
So just leading on from that, and looking at women in specifically, I think there's a sense that the question is, are all women supposed to be torchbearers for all other women? And certainly there are women that get put on pedestals within the industry, and you kind of sometimes think, is everybody just waiting to knock them off? Or they become targets for, oh, look what I found out, or that person did this, that and the other. And I think that's quite damaging and limiting in society. But I think the question is, are women expected to be torchbearers? And if you fail at something as a woman, is it harder? Do we get kicked harder? Is it higher expected because of the expectation? Are people waiting for people to fall? So I'm going to pass that to you.
I think if you have a story, it's a great story. No one expects you to be a torchbearer. That's not a demand that you should have to follow. But if you've got a great story, you see online how these stories could be, really inspirational. So I would suggest that one of the worst things you can do is bottle that up and not voice that story. It was the Olympics, wasn't it? A couple of years ago, the caption for the Olympics was "Inspire a Generation," and the way you do that is by creating a story. Brand the broken, isn't it? Like the worst ending to a series ever. But that mentality was there. Who had the best story? So the reason for the ending of Game of Thrones, if anyone hasn't watched it, I'm spoiling it, so sorry. He had the best story, so if you've got a great story, just stand up and sell it, and then try and gather the right people around you to support you. If you are torch-bearing, as such, try not to do it on your own, because that will lead to that sort of situation where you're being targeted. So get people involved in your story, ask them to help you out. How would I deliver this message? And yeah, sing it from the hilltops.
I think that's absolutely excellent advice about not doing it on your own.
Yeah.
I think that some of the key figures, somebody like Cindy Gallop, people like that who have been real kind of trailblazers for some quite controversial women's movements. If you don't follow her on Twitter, you should. She runs something called the 3% Conference. So only 3% of creative directors are women. It's shocking, isn't it? But she's quite a divisive person. But actually, when she's right, she has a crowd of people that will support her, and she gets attacked a lot. So I think that that's really important. And Ariane, I'll lead on to you, because you can tell us about some of the things that you do within the women's space in digital. It'd be lovely to hear that.
It's something that I've talked about a bit. If anyone was at Brighton SEO in September, I gave a talk about failure and how it affects women in particular. That because we're scared to fail because of how we'll be judged or perceived, it often puts us off trying, and in general it holds the industry back. And while we're all aware of the glass ceiling, there's also very much this concept of the glass cliff that they talk about, where, for example, women will get parachuted into companies or positions where they've got no chance of succeeding. Think of Marissa Mayer going into Yahoo. Nobody was ever going to turn Yahoo round, but then because Yahoo fails, they point at her and go, that's why women make terrible CEOs. And it's something that Mindy Kaling has talked about in promoting her new movie, where she plays a minority writer on a comedy show. And she said it's very much that thing of when you're in there as the diversity hire, you know that you have to do a good job, because otherwise you're used as an excuse as to why diversity and inclusion doesn't work. Or, Asian people can't write, or, women are bad at this, and it gets used sometimes, often subconsciously, but often quite overtly, to make these blanket statements. And that's where it can be really damaging. And it's perhaps something that happens to women more than men. Although, with Me Too, there's not all men, because, not all men. However, I think with women, often we are expected to show what women can do. And that can be a little tiring and a little hard to do sometimes. But at the same time, I think Martin's made a great point about not doing it on your own and finding those allies, be they male or female, and not being scared of failure. While it might be that we're held to a higher standard, the reality is that even if we fail, it's all about learning the lesson from that and moving on and iterating and trying again. But it's finding an environment that's supportive and allows for that. If you do feel somewhere where you are judged because you're a woman or you're a minority, and that you're somehow expected to be representative of the entire sector that you're part of, get out of that environment, because it's not good for you, it's not supportive, and it's really, really isolating, I think, to sometimes be in that position.
I think I'd build on that just in terms of false allies. This is unfortunately, you can't just have allies. You also have to be aware that some people are false allies, and they're using your diversity point for their own capital gain. And I think that's become out more in this sort of phase 2 from Me Too. There's been lots of men like, oh yeah, I get that, and look at my new female CEO. There's I won't go into who it is, but there's a company in Manchester who provide some sort of technology solutions, and all of a sudden they have a female CEO, but they used to put Go Faster on right up until the year before, and all their girls who used to go to the shows, I Go Faster, Jump on Me, things like that. So beware of false allies and beware of false gestures, I think, as well, because it's kind of not cool. In fact, for me, it's doubly bad. It's a double slap in the face. Ruth, you got anything to add on that?
I agree with having that support network and having people that will champion you, and doing the same, giving that back, championing other people, supporting other people, and just building up that network of male and female that you can support and that will support you, and just having that and knowing that you've got that. So if you want to make a case, there will be people that agree with you and want you to succeed.
So just sort of taking this out into sort of broader industry, what do we feel the industry can do to make it a more welcoming place for not just women, but also more diverse workforces? And we chatted about this earlier, so I'd love to know from somebody who's quite new into the industry, what your impression of was before you came into was, what your impression of was it?
So because I work in SEO, so before I joined the industry, I just thought it was middle-aged men hacking websites trying to get on top of Google, which is such a naive way to look at it.
Kind of true.
And when I joined the industry, it was completely not like that. And I remember going through lists of top SEO experts and not seeing any females, and just being why are women not getting involved? But then when I joined, I realised there's so many amazing women working in the industry, doing amazing things, and they're not getting heard. They're not putting themselves out there. but it's important to remember that there are women in there, and like these, you know, women in SEO groups, joining those and forming those networks and connections and seeing that there are women doing incredible things is so important to know and to have that and to see that like coming into the industry, and it's just becoming bigger. There's just more now growing.
So role models, so coming back to the torchbearers, it's something I take very seriously, and I would urge anyone who's even a couple of years into their career or more so to actually think about yourself as a role model and to make that set of conditions as optimal for everybody else who's coming in to the industry is really important. Martin, what's your take on that?
A couple of things. So I'm not a fan of like positive discrimination, and one place you see this quite often is recruitment. So I would happily take down, you know, the labelling within the, you know, the recruitment forms that you have to fill out. You know, what's your race, what's your gender. You know, we shouldn't have to fill these things out. You should be taken on merit, and everybody should be given an equal chance. So equality is a big deal. Equality starts at, you know, the point of labelling. So as soon as you have to assign yourself with a label, you know that equality is, you know, has been missed. And I think one thing the industry doesn't do too well is, you know, offering, you know, equality in some of the, you know, showcasing, when we're showcasing things like the people in the business. I saw a couple of tweets recently where somebody created one of these lists. I hate these lists, you know, the top 20 personalities in a particular industry, and I think it was like 95% men. So somebody sort of complained, and then there was another top 20 women in industry, and I was like, that's shit, you know, that's pandering to the fact that you can't be asked to update your list to include the right people. So as a woman, don't let yourself be put on a specialist list. If somebody tries to, you know, narrow you down to a specific women's only list, say, hey, no, fuck that. Where's the proper list?
Because it's just highlighting the fact that women are working in SEO. Like, it shouldn't be highlighted.
Yeah, so definitely kick off and complain.
Yeah.
And you know, the Me Too is just the tip of the iceberg, isn't it? So it's just proving that when we get together and start sort of ranting and raving, things happen. So, you know, don't let people get away with these shitty little lists online. If they're not diverse and they're not offering some kind of equality, then, you know, kick off. And don't worry about what people say, because, you know, social media is full of shit. So
I think I found someone who swears more than me when you're on
right.
stage.
Bill,
Friends for life
you
now.
got to have that thick skin. So going back to the confidence sort of section before, honestly, sort of rant and rave on social media, that will really help you build up thick skin. There'll be a time when you get some shit back off people, and yeah, it might hurt you somewhat, but just keep going. You know, I've been doing this for years. I've had some nasty battles online, and it's really, really thickened my skin. And now I'm not afraid to go and tell somebody if they're being an arsehole. So I was never like that,
Lessons for
by the way.
life. So I'm going to wrap up because I want everyone to have a solid lunch hour, because there's some great bars and restaurants around here, because I'm a Leeds lass and I'm telling you to go out and have a good time for a few hours. But before I do, has anybody got any questions just from the audience? I'd like to throw that out, but also if anyone wants to ask any of us anything afterwards, you can probably find us on Twitter. Yes, do you want to shout? Go for it. Okay, so point one, come see me afterwards. Point two, I'll answer this because I'm a working mother. Do you want to see pictures of my kids? I can get them out for anyone later. I completely agree with you. 100% agree with you. We have a talent deficit in agencies, and I've done agency and client side, I've said, and women in the top in agencies who have had children are neglected, left to the sidelines, and ultimately don't progress. I'm going to make it my life's work to try and change that, hopefully, because actually you are talking now into clients who are many of which are women, and in client side probably working mothers, and you're not talking to them because they don't have that representation within agencies. So let's fuck it up and change it. Hey, let's go, but come see me afterwards.
And if I may add to that as well, I think there's a really good number of men in the room today, and I'm glad to see so many here. But this is really where men can also make a difference as allies. There's a great anecdote from Melinda Gates' new book where she talks about, her husband Bill, who runs Microsoft, and she found it impossible to, deal with the kids every day, take the kids to school, pick them up, and work, because she was also working full-time at Microsoft and at the Gates Foundation. And so she talked to him about this, and he said, you know what, I will take the kids to school 2 days a week. I'll commit to doing that so that you don't have 100% of the responsibility. And what was hilarious was a couple of months later, one of the mums stopped her at school and said, have you seen how many other fathers are bringing their kids to school now? Because I went home and I said to my partner, if Bill Gates can bring his kids to school, so can you. And this is where we need men who take time out to attend school assemblies, who leave early on a Friday to pick their kids up from something, who set that example so it becomes normal. And that's the thing, as long as the onus is always on the women, it's never going to be normalised and it's never going to be okay, but making it okay is going to be largely in the hands of men, and that's where we need these men who are allies to really step up and help, because equality is something that we all have to do, and having everybody involved in more of an extent is going to lead to products and solutions that are better because they represent everybody. So it's in everybody's best interest, really. Please, men.
No, everyone's hungry out there, I can tell. I was like, come on, finish. Brilliant. Thank you very much for listening to us, and thank you very much, panel.